Hello and welcome to episode number 13 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, Unlucky 13. This is the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And we got a jam-packed episode today. But let's start real quick by talking about something that we just missed last week. It happened right after we recorded, so we weren't able to get it in. And this is what has been dubbed Hurricane Conor.
Yeah. I don't think anyone in the league has announced 4 trades at once before. I'm actually a bit jealous. But yeah, Conor made 4 pretty big trades to really shake up his team. The first 2 were actually a bit on the smaller end, but I'll read them out here. The Off-White Sox agreed to trade Andrews' 2021 third-round pick, which is the 25th overall pick, to the Stanton Stranglers for catcher James McCann. And the Off-White Sox agreed to trade first baseman Evan White to Moneyball for Braden Schumacher and EVO's 2023 third-round pick. Do you have any thoughts on either of those trades, Cam?
The first trade I have 0 thoughts on. But the second one, I was a little surprised. I feel like Evan White wasn't the best hitter this season, but he's a big prospect. He's going to get a ton of playing time at first base for the Mariners. I think he's incredibly valuable, and Conor sold low on him. Shoemake is certainly a much less impressive prospect than Evan White. In 14 games in Double-A in 2019, he straight up did not hit the ball at all. And the third-round pick is nothing. I feel like Conor could have gotten a lot more for Evan White or just held on to him even.
I'll speak to the James McCann trade quickly and then kind of transition into Evan White here. McCann, low-key, over the past 2 seasons, has picked it up a bit with the hitting. I don't think Conor really needed a second catcher with Travis d'Arnaud. But I think for the price, not a terrible gamble. Again, I'm just not a fan of having 2 catchers on a roster, so I thought this move was largely unnecessary. But also kudos to Eric for hanging on to him and being able to trade him once McCann signed with the Mets. I agree with you on the Evan White deal. I remember talking to Zane when Evan White was put on the trade block, and I was like, this would be the perfect kind of ad for one of the teams that's maybe like rebuilding or is kind of looking for a first baseman on the cheap. And kudos to Yuki for taking advantage of that because, I think his only first baseman was like Christian Walker. Walker's put up some decent numbers, but he's replaceable. And I think you're right. Evan White has the upside. The Mariners signed him to that long-term deal, I think 6 years, $24 million. So they're committed to playing him at first base. The numbers were really ugly this year. I mean, he had a 66 WRC plus, and you want to guess what his strikeout rate was, Cam?
I would not be able to hazard a guess.
41.6%. Yeah, that's high, but the upside is there. I don't know if he's going to be like your 30-40 home run first baseman, but I think that he could be at least a starting corner infield in this league potentially. So yeah, I think you're right. A little early for Conor to give him up. I'm a little higher in Schumacher than you are, I think. I know he was on Fangraphs Picks to Click to make their 2021 top 100, and he was also one of the Zips top 100 prospects going into this year. And while he struggled in 14 games in Double-A, he had 51 strong games in High A. He was a first-round pick in 2019, so, maybe he turns into something. But I think you're right. I think given the position Conor's in, I think I would have gambled on Evan White for another year or two. At the very least, there's no way his value gets worse than this, So let's transition to the bigger trades that he made. Conor traded Carter Kieboom, Ronnie Mauricio, and his 2021 second-round pick to Bo with the Flow for Ryan McMahon and Tommy Edman. Let's start with your thoughts here.
I think Bo with the Flow got the winning end of this deal once again. Another trade, where Conor's trading a couple young guys for a couple older guys. Mauricio is a top 50 prospect. Carter Kieboom is a top 30 prospect, although he has struggled in the majors when he's been up. But he's got a 13.9% walk rate, and he's only 23. So I certainly think that he's a valuable guy. And whereas Tommy Edman, Conor seemed to be the higher on him than Ryan McMahon.
Yeah, I am too.
But I'm just not buying it. he is young. He's 25, but the Cardinals just have another one of these guys every year who's 25, and he has one good season in the infield, and then he goes away. Like Aledmys Diaz. Edman was phenomenal in 2019 as a rookie, but he had that 346 BABIP. He never walked, and this year he really crashed down to earth, and I think this is more his value going forward.
Yeah,
And
remember, I'll bring up one more name for you, Yairo Munoz. He had a great 2018 with the Cardinals. The 2019, the playing time dips, the performance dips. He gets really pissed off about it and like leaves the team pretty much. And they caught him right before the 2020 season.
yeah, God, exactly. Have
But
any of these? I guess Colton Wong is really the only one that has kind of stuck around.
well, I think so. I agree with your analysis pretty much. I think Keyboom kind of reminds me of Evan White here in the sense that I feel like Connor just sold him low after one season in a pandemic shortened season, and I'm struggling to understand that, especially because he's been
Absolutely.
pretty high on Keyboom like for a while. Like Keyboom was someone who's been pretty off talking or pretty much just like someone that he wouldn't trade and trade talks. He was off limits. So I'm a little curious by that. And Mauricio, like you said, top 50 prospects. So, I mean, these are two guys entering into the season who were top 50 prospects. And then he gives up a second round pick on top of that. Tommy Edman, I think you're right. I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in 2019. I think he could be a league average bat. He does have some stolen base upside. The walk rate did go up this year, which I liked, although the ISO is pretty bad. The 33-point drop in WRC plus is not friendly. He doesn't have a high exit velocity.
Sounds like an Eric player.
Exactly. Exactly. But with Colton Wong leaving, maybe this opens up a lot more playing time for Edman. He still played in 55 games this year. So, like, it's not like the Cardinals are avoiding using him.
That's
So,
fair. They do seem to have more of a commitment to him than some of the other guys we mentioned.
right. But at the same time, I don't think he's a high upside player, and I'd rather have Keyboom or Mauricio than him.
Absolutely.
Certainly, I think Edman could have been cheaper. And I've said a lot about Ryan McMahon and kind of my distaste for him. I'll read you his WRC pluses in the past 4 years: 47, 69, 88, 76. And his one like foolish season of at-bats, he had 24 homers, 5 stolen bases, and a 329 OBP. So again, that makes him a decent fantasy asset. He's going to give you some homers, a little bit of upside in steals, not like enough to make him an asset there, but hey, it's something. And the OBP doesn't kill you, but like it doesn't make him anything special. It doesn't make him anything to give up a top prospect for. And if you look at his 2020, yes, he hit 9 home runs, which is nice, but his strikeout rate went up to 34.2%. The walk rate dropped, and he didn't even have an OBP above 300. So it just, I get that he's 26. I get that he's eligible at 3 different infield positions, which I know Connor really likes, and I know Edman also has multi-positional eligibility. But like, man, I just think he could have gotten them for a lot cheaper. And I, of all the deals he made, I like the other 3 deals that he made. I really struggle with this one.
I agree. That's 2 trades in a row for Connor that it feels like he's just selling guys once they reach the majors for very low. It'd be like if I were to sell Joe Adell right now for, say, who's a crappy outfielder.
Nomar Mazara.
Yeah, for maybe not Nomar Mazara, but
Maybe a little better than Nomar Mazara.
something like that. Anyway, I feel like he's got to hold on to these guys a little longer. But the 4th trade Connor made, maybe we have different opinions on it. This is one where Connor traded Alex Kirilloff, a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd to the executive batting order for Alex Verdugo and prospect Mason Martin. Why don't you talk first about this?
This was a very interesting trade. Verdugo was someone that I like a lot. It's interesting to see how he has bounced around the league quite a bit over the past few months. He had a 367 OBP this year with 6 homers and 4 stolen bases. So there's a lot of upside both in the OBP and with the homers and the stolen bases. The numbers might have been inflated a bit by a 371 BABIP, but I still think that he's a very solid outfielder. He's going to be 25 this year. And I think even if he kind of has an OBP closer to 2019, where he had the 342 clip, I still think he's going to be immensely valuable. I don't know that much about Mason Martin. He strikes me more as just a throw-in. But on the other side of this, Kirilloff is an interesting guy. With the Twins non-tendering Eddie Rosario, I think that he's going to get the opportunity to hold down the left field job. And, hard to tell what he's going to do in the majors, but he is a top prospect. So it does raise some interest, just kind of like when Connor or a team like this ends up, trading a guy with that type of pedigree. But I think where this deal gets even trickier to analyze is the inclusion of Connor's 2022 first-round pick. That pick, if I had to guess right now, is probably going to be a lottery pick. I think Connor's on the rise, but I'm having a hard time envisioning a scenario where he's a playoff team in 2021, and I think you would agree with me on that. So, if you're giving up Kirilloff and a lottery pick for Verdugo, not to mention a second-round pick and a third-round pick, maybe that's a slight overpay for Verdugo. I'm not sure, but I really like Verdugo, and, I think he's proven himself over the past couple of years that he could be a really solid asset. So while I think maybe this might be a slight overpay for Connor, it's one of those overpays where I don't mind because you're kind of getting that established player that you really like. And I think EVO, I know they really didn't want to trade Verdugo, but I think they got some nice value here.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. I think Connor probably lost this trade as well. It is an overpay for Verdugo, especially since he's got a first rounder going. That's almost certainly going to be a lottery pick. I am high on Verdugo, but I'm also fairly high on Kirilloff. And I think the first rounder is what tips the scales in order to be a win for EBO, I would say. Mason Martin, he's not really anything. He's a Pirates first base prospect who's hit very well in the low minors, but he's a throw-in. Most boards aren't super high on him. Yeah, I like Verdugo a lot, but I think this was just a little too expensive.
Yeah, I think if EBO gave up, or sorry, other way around. I think if Connor gave up a late first-round pick, so like if he gave up like my pick or your pick or EBO's pick, for example, I think I'd probably be calling him a winner here. But the fact that lottery pick could easily be top 3, I have a hard time saying that he won this trade. But I think Verdugo will be a great asset for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And you also made quite a fair amount of moves this week as well. You wanted to start off by talking about your Gary Sanchez trade, which will lead you into the ones you made on Thursday.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to start with the bigger story here. What you see on the spreadsheet is that I agreed to the Gary Sanchez deal on December 12th and then agreed to the Lourdes Gurriel for Brandon Lowe and the Brandon Lowe for Cavan Biggio deals on the 17th. But the order was not what it looks like here. When we did the mock MLB winter meetings, I think 10 days ago, Yuki was also participating in that, and he had a couple of days before that been talking about a mystery player that he'd really been pushing to acquire. And I was trying to guess who that player was because he was like, "Oh, this is the type of guy I'd trade Bryce Harper for." So after those fake winter meetings, he was like, "I mentioned this player during the winter meetings. Like, did you hear me mention him?" And I was trying to think of who it was, and finally it clicked. I was like, "Oh, it's Brandon Lowe." And I was like, I really want Cavan Biggio from you. And I was like, how do I get Cavan Biggio? He's like, the only way is if you get Brandon Lowe. So he was a little unsure at first, but finally he was like, look, if you get Brandon Lowe and Taylor Walls, who's the player to be named later in the deal, I'll give you Cavan Biggio. So at this point, I still haven't agreed to any other deals. I was like, I could trade Gary Sanchez to get Sean Murphy, who I like better, and get Eduardo Rodriguez. Rodriguez was not initially in that package. Alex was very hesitant to trade him. And finally, I kept pushing for him. And ultimately, I think in one of the hardest negotiations I've had, I was able to get him to include him. And I saw getting Eduardo Rodriguez as key because I was like, he's a trade chip that I could package to go get Brandon Lowe. So Eduardo Rodriguez, JD Davis, and Alex Canario was my offer for Brandon Lowe and Taylor Walls initially. Alex and Daniel really wanted to get Lourdes Gurriel instead of JD Davis. They had asked me about him at the trade deadline. They'd offered McCullers up for Gurriel, and I ultimately balked at that price. We were kind of at a bit of a stalemate for a couple of days, and finally I was like, look, like I really want to get Biggio. I don't want to give up Gurriel. I really like him, but if that's the price, so be it. But then I was like, look, I'll need more to get a deal done here. They offered Daniel Lynch initially. I asked for Nick Lodolo. They acquiesced, hence that trade. And then Yuki and I still had the Low for Biggio deal on, so we made it. And I'm still holding on to Walls as the player to be named later for now. Maybe when this podcast airs, Yuki will have Taylor Walls. But that's how it went down. So these trades are actually agreed to out of order. I made the Gary Sanchez deal and the Lourdes Gurriel deal in anticipation of getting Cavan Biggio. So I haven't exactly done stuff like that before. This was a kind of a bit of a new thing for me, like making multiple trades to go get a player that I really wanted. But I'm really excited with how it played out. But I'll discuss the individual trades here. Gary Sanchez, I mean, going into last season, we all know top 2 dynasty catcher. And I just think that he's been trending in the wrong direction. I bought in at the beginning of last season, regrettably, and traded Will Smith for him. I thought that Will Smith wasn't really playing every day at the time, and he wasn't really hitting that well. Gary Sanchez had a bit of a slow start at the time with like 5 games, but like he had the pedigree, and we know what happens when he gets hot. And he was really good in 2019, other than a down month when he was hurt. I was very wrong about that. I mean, Gary did his job for me in the sense that he swung 2 categories in my favor in the semis matchup, but I just don't trust him long term. Sean Murphy is a guy that I really like. He came on very strong at the end of last season, also hit well in 2019, and he was a top like 40, 50 prospect going into last year. So I wanted him. And I kind of upsold Sanchez a bit to Alex and got him to include Eduardo Rodriguez in the deal. So I was really happy with how that played out for me. And then I think for Alex, the upside of getting someone who could be a top 2 dynasty catcher. And I mean, keep in mind, there are people who are debating between him and Real Muto for being a top catcher going into last season. So, if Gary bounces back, and even if he puts up like the 320 OBP, 33 home runs kind of level that he did in 2019, those are really good numbers coming out of your catcher position. So for Alex's sake, I really hope Gary really bounces back. The Lourdes Gurriel, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Alex Canario for Brandon Lowe, Nick Lodolo, Taylor Walls in 2026 third-round pick deal. Eduardo Rodriguez, it was expendable for me. I already have 10 starting pitchers besides him, and I don't like to carry more than 10 starting pitchers. I think that that's the perfect number. And I'm a little concerned with him coming back from the heart issue. I know that all the reports are very positive right now, and it seems like he's going to come back and be ready for 2021, but there's just so much not known with that. And we've heard some players who have come back from COVID and have had some issues handling it. I know I got to see it play out on national TV on Monday night with Lamar Jackson and the cramps that he had. And he came out and he said that COVID really affected him during the game. So that made me a little hesitant with Erod, although obviously, he was 6th in the AL Cy Young in 2019. So the upside's there. But I also don't think he's the type of guy who's ever going to give you like the low 3s ERA numbers. I think part of his appeal in 2019 was that he threw 200 innings. I don't know if he does that in his first season coming off the heart surgery. So I was willing to trade him. Lourdes Gurriel was really tough to part with. I love his profile. I love the numbers. He's going to bat in the middle of a great Toronto lineup. He slumped to start the season, but he really came on strong at the end, and that really helped my playoff push. The one thing that made me a little hesitant with him and why I was willing to trade him is that he's just not a high OBP guy. He reminds me almost of a better version of Eddie Rosario, who I traded away this offseason. He had a 348 OBP this year with a 308 average, so the walk rate wasn't high, only 6%. But he had a 351 BABIP. So if he had a 318 BABIP the year before, which was more where I expect him to kind of fall, and he had a 327 OBP doing that. So I think he's more of like a 325, 330 OBP hitter. I think he's going to hit probably 30 home runs. And I mean, he had 6 stolen bases in 84 games in 2019. So I think he could put up like 10 stolen bases. I'm not saying that that's not a valuable player, but I'm not about that low OBP. And he was really tough to give up. And I'm confident that I could package Lodolo and like JD Davis in the 19th pick to go get an outfielder that I like just as much, if not better than Gurriel. So that made me feel a bit better about that. Canario is just a prospect that they like that like I thought was pretty decent, but is like whatever, I could give him up. That's not going to prevent a deal. And I mentioned I got Taylor Walls for Yuki, which leads me to the last trade, Brandon Lowe and Walls for Biggio. What's funny is Brandon Lowe and Cavan Biggio already have a pretty lengthy history with each other in this league. So back in the first season, Brandon Lowe and Cavan Biggio were traded with each other by Eric to Max Brill back when he was in the league for Blake Trinan. So Eric got Trinan, Max got Biggio and Lowe, in a trade that really didn't work out so well for Eric. Fast forward to 2019, and I acquired both Biggio and Lowe in the same deal for Ender Inciarte, Robinson Cano, Ryan Mountcastle, and Nick Solak. Unfortunately, I made a couple bad decisions after that. I traded Brandon Lowe and Jorge Mateo for Yanni Chirinos. Chirinos eventually helped me get Sano, which helped me get Chapman. So don't regret getting Matt Chapman, but that trade was pretty rough. And Cavan Biggio ended up being a throw-in in the Sonny Gray trade I made a couple weeks after that because I didn't have the roster space for him at the time and I wanted to compete. But I really regretted giving up Cavan Biggio. And I've been trying to get him back for like over a year, and Yuki just would not budge. So I'm really glad I finally got him back. I think Biggio is a great asset. He's conveniently played 159 games in the majors now. So just to give you an idea of how he could perform over a season, 24 homers, 20 stolen bases, a 240 average with a 368 OBP. And he has second and third in outfield eligibility. So he could play 11 of the 14 positions that we have in Dynasty. And I think he could easily gain first base eligibility. So I think he could pretty much do everything but catch and play shortstop. So that flexibility is immensely valuable. He scores a lot of runs on top of that Blue Jays lineup. And there's no reason to believe he can't score over 100 runs with like Gurriel and Guerrero and Bo Bichette and all those other guys there. And I also think there's some growth in the homer and stolen base categories to come. I think he could easily be a 25 homer or a 30 home run hitter with like 25 stolen bases. So I'm really excited about the potential there. Also the walk rate. I mean, let me pull up the exact number because this is like, he already with a minimum of 250 plate appearances has the highest walk rate of any Blue Jay in their history. He had a 16.5% walk rate in 2019, a 15.5% walk rate this year. He cut the strikeout rate down by 5.5 points. Now, you may be like, well, he bats for a low average. And that's true. But let's keep in mind, a 245 average is what's league average. He's batting roughly around the league average, which is totally acceptable when you combine it with these walk numbers. And because we're an OBP league and the average doesn't matter, I'm fine with that. And the other thing is a lot of his lower strikeout rates can be more, lower batting average, I feel like is more attributable to his lack of aggressiveness, like swinging, as opposed to kind of anything fundamentally wrong with his swing. He's shown over the course of these seasons in times where he's a little more aggressive, he hits a bit better. So I think he has to be careful in trying to balance the being a little more aggressive with the bat with not losing this fantastic batting eye and the walk rate that he has. But I'm confident he'll be able to do that. So overall, I feel like he's a 5-category contributor. He'll give me homers. He'll give me stolen bases, a great OBP, lots of runs. solid RBI numbers as well. And he really adds to Yelich and Tatis on my team with the stolen base prowess, which should help me in that category. And I've really been building a high OBP team here. I've dumped Gary Sanchez. I've dumped Eddie Rosario. I've brought in guys like Max Muncy and George Springer, JD Davis, and now Biggio, Tatis, who are all like high OBP guys. So really just goes into strategy. Brandon Lowe, to talk briefly about him. I know I'm going on for a while here, but we're going to go with this. He's a little older than Biggio, which I didn't like. He'll be 27 next year. He had the 34.6% strikeout rate in 2019 and a 377 BABIP to get that 336 OBP. I like the power numbers. I think his overall profile is really decent. He had a much better year this year. He upped the walk rate. The strikeout rate dropped by almost 10%. And with a more sustainable BABIP at 309, he had a 362 OBP, a 150 WRC plus. He had 14 homers in 56 games. I think he could easily be a 30 home run hitter at the position. And I think that he could hit, have like a 350, 360 OBP. I don't think he's the stolen base upside that Biggio has. I think he's a little more of a riskier proposition, given that he struggled a bit in 2018 and 2019. When I say struggled, it's not really like he had bad numbers, but just like some of these metrics that were a bit concerning. He also wasn't hitting that well against lefties traditionally in his career. He actually had some very solid splits against him this year, and he did play in 56 of the 60 games for the Rays. So I feel like that he could be an everyday player for him, but you know how the Rays like to platoon guys and do weird stuff. So when I gave up Biggio and Lowe, I was really regretting giving up Biggio. I knew when Lowe broke out, I was like, okay, this is great, but like I didn't really regret it. My gut was always that I just like Biggio more than Lowe. I did a lot of research into both of them just to kind of confirm that decision, and ultimately I just went with my gut and the player that I really like. So hence me taking that trade. And I'll say one brief thing for each of Alex and Daniel and Yuki's sides of these deals here. I think Alex and Daniel got a lot of what they're looking for. Eduardo Rodriguez is a nice add to their rotation, especially because they have some decent depth there. I know they have Severino coming off the Tommy John. They have Lance McCullers. Chris Bassett is like criminally underrated. Dustin May. But I think that, adding another arm there is really going to help, especially because you and I have talked about, and I know Zane especially is really high on them as potentially being a wild card team. So I think any depth that they could get in that rotation would help. And while I think Biggio is a better dynasty asset than Gurriel, I think Gurriel is a very solid asset. I've seen him bring to very high in lists. There are a lot of people that are high on him. I mean, I just thought Biggio was slightly better for my team, and it helped me consolidate value. But it's not a critique on Gurriel. And I think from Yuki's side, Brandon Lowe's a player he really wanted. I've talked about the upside here with Brandon Lowe and how great he did. I mean, 8th place in the MVP voting this year, 150 WRC plus. And I know he likes walls. I think he's going to come on eventually and talk a bit more about that. So I'm not going to kind of do that analysis. But I think everyone got a bit of what they want here. I'm admittedly a bit scared about giving up Eduardo and, Lourdes Gurriel, but I really like in Cavan Biggio and Nick Lodolo. So that's my long-winded explanation about these trades. And what are your thoughts, Cam?
Well, you went on for half an hour and mispronounced Brandon Lau's name about 30 times. But I think my take is a lot different because I would simply much rather have Brandon Lau than Cavan Biggio, and I don't think it's particularly close in my opinion. Okay. And I think that if you had stopped after the first 2 trades you made, you'd be coming out way ahead. And I guess I can talk about the reason I have that different opinion, and it's mostly just because Brandon Lau, the StatCast numbers are significantly better than Biggio's. Biggio was 2019 was kind of mediocre on StatCast, and this year they absolutely tanked. The exit velocity was 24th percentile. He doesn't really swing the bat much. He does walk a lot, which is nice. But unlike, say, Joey Votto, who doesn't swing the bat much, Biggio does not make good contact on the times he does swing the bat, which I certainly think doesn't help you much. And there's the fact he's only a year older, so there's no difference in age there. And Lau just absolutely mashed this season. His slugging percentage was .554. He hit very nearly as many home runs in the shortened season as he did in all of 2019. And he was playing every day, which means I'm not worried about playing time. And his walk rate is not quite as high as Biggio's, but it was still 11.2%. That's very good. So I think that, in my mind, is a whiff for you. But before that, I'm high on Sean Murphy. I think trading Gary Sanchez, this is kind of the low point of his value. So it may be a little early to trade him, but you got great value, so I'm not going to complain too much. Eduardo Rodriguez, I think, is way too risky for someone to take on. So I think, is this the second time you've traded him this offseason already?
Yeah, I've acquired him twice and traded him twice, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't touch him, as sad as it is. The heart condition, he could be a Kenley Jansen who has had the heart condition but been a solid player, or he could just have, this could be career altering. Who knows? I wouldn't want to risk that. But I think that second deal, I do like Gurriel, but getting Lau and getting Lodolo, especially for those two guys, for Gurriel and Rodriguez, is a win for you there. So there's a lot of good and bad, but I think the end result being something that I disagree with hurts my overall opinion of your big spree.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis, and like I said, I did a lot of research into both Lau and Biggio. I knew one of Nate and Brandon was Lau and the other was Low, and I couldn't remember which was which. But I did a lot of research into both. There are a lot of rankings that have Lau over Biggio, but there's also a lot of rankings that have Biggio over Lau. So I saw that more as like it's kind of a bit of a toss up in that regard. I've liked Biggio since he was in the minors. He's been someone I've targeted. He's just always been someone I've liked. And I just think he has a very fantasy friendly profile. And I mean, to your point about the contact, maybe the contact's not great, and maybe that just means he's a 230 hitter. But I think fantasy wise, he's still going to do well in a lot of these different categories. You know, I think Biggio's proved it over 159 games. And look, if he's putting up 25 homers, 20 stolen bases, and a 370-ish OBP in his career with some of these low StatCast numbers, like, it's still a good asset. The StatCast numbers are really the only thing that concerns me. And even if he's just like average like he was in 2019 there with those numbers, I think he'll be fine. I agree that Low might end up being better, but I'd rather go down with someone that I've just always been a bit higher on than going down with Brandon Lau, who for some reason I've never just totally been sold on. But it's been mixed opinions. For the most part, the people I've talked to in this league, just kind of after the trade, were more on Team Biggio than Team Lau. I think Zane thought Biggio had some more upside. I like Point Blank asked Ruthvik a couple hours ago, which one's better. He said Biggio easily. So I think it's a matter of personal opinion here. But I think either way, Yuki and I both got very good players there. So let's see what happens. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm in the minority here.
Who knows? And again, I will say a lot of fantasy experts have Lau over Biggio. The Fangraphs, when they did their second base fantasy rankings, had Lau 4 and Biggio 5, for example. So who knows?
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see. Is there anything else we want to talk about?
Yeah, you know what? One last thing I'll bring up, and we've spent a lot of time talking today, so I don't really want to get into any of these, but I love this edition of the hot take sheet. I feel like we make a lot of hot takes in the Slack. I know that a lot of our dynasty or a lot of the other dynasty leagues I'm in have a similar tab, just because we, say so much crap over all the years and stuff. So I'm glad that that's centralized, and I would encourage some people to put some more of their hot takes there, especially if they're a bit more realistic. Because one of the things I pitched to Cam was that we do an episode where we talk about some of these more like realistic hot takes and see if we think that this might actually be a reality. So if there's anything that you're really thinking about as a potential hot take that you would like us to discuss, and not something like, oh, Chris Davis is going to have a higher WRC plus than Mike Trout this year, like, please put them in there. I'd love to read them and to discuss them and to kind of give my thoughts on them.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a fun episode. There's some crazy ones in there, but I am excited to kind of dive into them in more detail.
Absolutely. And one last thing that I want to add is that we have now made 72 trades this offseason. On one of the early podcasts, I predicted that we would make 70 trades all offseason. We're not even out of 2020 yet, and we've made this many trades. I mean, I don't know about you, Cam, but I cannot have predicted that at the start of this offseason.
It's just been an insane amount, and a lot of them feel like people are making trades for the sake of making trades, but some of them are really big too.
Yeah. And to put that number in comparison, we made 75 trades in all of 2019. And then in a 3-month, not even a 3-month span, we've made 72. And I think we could easily pass that number, the 75 number, before the new year starts. So it's interesting. But, very productive trade week, and hopefully we see some more of these, so we have a lot more content to talk about. I know we got the winter meetings coming up, and a lot of teams are kind of talking about trades behind the scenes. So yeah, anything else you want to add, Cam?
No, yeah, I'm also expecting another big week in terms of moves in this league next week. And yeah, we're about to take a break right now, but we'll come back with one of the people who made trades this week, Daniel, co-owner of the Fighting Bellies. All right, we're excited to bring on for the first time Daniel, co-owner of the Fighting Bellies. How are you doing this evening?
I'm phenomenal. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Yeah, so you had said in the Slack that you wanted to come on to spew some propaganda. So I guess what do you have for us?
So the spewage really begins with this mentality of contentness, really just not being present in this league. And I think if people meditated on their moves and their actions and their roster decisions, I think people would realize that they grow an attachment to their players, and especially to their minor league guys, and wouldn't be so ready to trade them if they took the time to really appreciate and foster that connection. So me and Alex have adopted that mentality and encourage the rest of the league to accept their players and make moves only when they see it as a true betterment, or a true improvement, not so much as a move to make a move.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. I know Max Smith has talked a lot about in the minor league system having that clubhouse connection, and that sounds like something that you're trying to do as well.
Well, is that their reasoning for putting the entire Tigers farm system on their roster?
Basically.
That was a lot of Zane as opposed to Max, I would say, behind those decisions. But yeah, I mean, you two are two of the Cam's made 8 trades this offseason, and you all have made 3. So that you're like two of the teams who have traded the least. I mean, I know I'm definitely at the other end here. I've made 30 trades. But I do like that strategy. I mean, I think the one thing I say that I really enjoy about this league is that everybody has such a different approach towards running their teams. And I have a lot of respect for the different ways that everyone runs their teams. So I like that, you all are active. You all really like the league. You all, check your lineup and make the moves that you need to, but you're not sitting here and like really, just like you said, making trades for the sake of making trades. You made a great trade last offseason for Bellinger because you saw the opportunity to get a stud, but, you didn't force any trades that you didn't need to. So I absolutely agree with that, and I appreciate that we have some different viewpoints in this league.
Yeah, and that's certainly not, I guess, a dig on people, who like you, Sahil, who trade with regularity, and that's kind of an understatement.
Yeah.
But really for us, it was kind of this odd collision on a less propaganda note. Alex and I just kind of were this odd collision of two people who didn't, during, like in December, we're like fantasy football people, and we have our players, and obviously we have not reaped nearly the same success that you have Sahil and Cam of late too. But either way, we're trying to as you do, shape a roster for the long haul. And we're only looking to make moves that we like. And I guess at the end of the day, we don't like a lot of moves.
Absolutely. I mean, like, I know Zane has come on here and said that he thinks you all could easily be a playoff team this year. I think I agree. I mean, I think that just not making that many moves has served you all pretty well so far, to be honest. And like, I'm thinking about even our like dynasty football league. Like, look at Evan. He hasn't made a single trade. I don't think he's used a single dollar of his fab either. And just with that team alone, he's the top seed. I think he had one loss all year. I haven't checked the scores for this week yet, but you're right. That approach really works. So I commend you all for doing it. But I guess to transition here a little bit, I feel like the Brandon Lau deal was one of those examples of like one of the few trades that you all make that I thought really kind of benefited your team. So if you wanted to maybe talk about your thoughts on that trade and kind of the players that you got and your decision to give up Brandon Lau, who I think, as we all know, had a very good 2020 season.
Yeah, it really wasn't so much as a desire. There wasn't anything that was driving us to part with Lau.
Yeah.
Like, obviously he had this phenomenal 60-game season, and we really did view him as a centerpiece for a while, but we started to kind of get a lot of inquiries about him, and nothing seemed to fit at first. We spoke to Yuki, who it just never lined up. Lau is a player that, like, he can't necessarily be traded for somebody better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because he had like the good 2020, but maybe the numbers before that weren't really
right. So we were looking with Yuki, and we were discussing a guy like Dallas Keuchel, who's this past year just finished 5th in Cy Young voting in the AL, like, phenomenal pitcher, but the package never seemed to work just positionally. We were looking for pitching, but the rest of the deal just kind of fell apart. But we knew then that there was pretty significant interest. You came knocking. Both Alex and I have liked Gurriel for a while. We needed the outfield help, especially. We have a lot of middle infielders. We're hoping that Gavin Lux makes a bigger impact this year so we can replace some of that production from Lau. Parting with Lodolo was honestly probably the hardest thing I had to do. I like him a lot, and I'm not sure he's going to be a starter. That was the only thing that kind of kept me content, was that that made me accept the deal a little more. And I loved, I'm going to butcher his name, but Canario. I think he's going to be a really good player, and I wasn't too upset to part with Taylor Walls, just another middle infield guy that we seem to have a few of the prototype.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I know you all have had the long-standing interest in Gurriel back to, I know at the trade deadline, we briefly discussed a Gurriel for McCullers deal, as I think I mentioned earlier on the podcast. So I wasn't surprised when you all came asking for him. And, I really didn't want to part with him either. I think you got a very good outfielder. And I think Eduardo Rodriguez, 6th in the Cy Young in 2019. I think you got 2 really good major league pieces here. So I definitely think it was a good deal. You all got a lot of value. I was really actually concerned about making this swap. I'm not so sure if it's going to work out for me at the end of the day. I mean, I obviously got Lau and Walls so I could give them to Yuki, but I'm a little less high on Lau than he is. But I think a very good trade by you all. And if this is your one big trade this offseason, I think you all kind of did a great job and did what you said. You made a very calculated decision to move a player at the right time once you're getting those inquiries. So I definitely like that a lot. Curious, what are your thoughts on Lodolo, Cam? Do you think he's going to end up being a starter, or do you think he might not?
I certainly see no reason why he wouldn't be a starter. He hasn't pitched a ton in affiliated ball just because he got a late start in 2019. And I think he had an injury that shut him down. I may be wrong on that. But he didn't walk a single batter in all 2019. And obviously there's no way to see how he did this year or watch him, especially after he got really destroyed in a exhibition game against the Tigers prior to the season. But yeah, I like him. I think he's a great prospect, and he's going to be in that rotation in a couple of years, especially if they trade away Sonny Gray and Luis Castillo.
Yeah, not to mention Trevor Bauer leaving. But let's move beyond this trade here. How do you feel about your team kind of going into the season? Where do you think you expect to finish? And do you think that there's any more kind of big moves in the pipeline, or is this more of a, if the opportunity comes up, maybe we'll do something, but we're pretty content with where we're at type of situation?
It's kind of a combination, to be quite honest. We're definitely in the market for more outfield help. We feel like we've built up our prospect capital pretty nicely, especially on the top end. So we plan this offseason to both draw from that and trade from it. Hopefully, we're hoping that we'll get some outfield help from Pache, or Pat. How is it Pache or Pache?
Pache,
Pache. Or yeah,
Pache. Yeah. Hopefully, especially if the Indians get rid of Lindor, we get to see a little of Nolan Jones. So we're definitely hoping to see some of the contributions from our guys who I guess were on taxi squads last year. But at the same time, we have arms arms and catchers, really. We have two catchers at the top of our system with Knizner and Stevenson, and Arm and Davy Garcia. So we're definitely looking to move, pieces that work for possibly some additional pitching or outfield help. But those would likely be the main moves we make.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a lot about some of the guys in your minor league roster. And I feel like that's a good way to transition into this upcoming draft. You only have one pick, but it is number 2 overall. There's been a lot of speculation that you may take Garrett Crochet. Are you willing to maybe talk about what your plan is, if you plan on acquiring other picks, and if you're willing to talk about some of the guys you're thinking about at number 2?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, this draft is really weird because there's a very, very clear number 1, and it kind of stops there. Crochet, I don't know where that speculation came from. So that's news to me. But, he's obviously the guy that's proven himself the most out of anyone in the draft class, really. He was the main one given the opportunity. So he's certainly become more intriguing that, you could draft a guy who's going to play for you this year, more than likely, may start for you, may close, going to be a hold guy either way. So Crochet is certainly somebody we're looking at, but generally focusing on arms. That the top of that draft class was super, super arm heavy with a lot of stud pitchers. So we're definitely looking Max Meyer, Lacey as well. Really that collection of guys. Reed Detmers is someone too. We have to do our research into Kierstad as well. There's a reason he went number 2. Austin Martin's another guy. So we're not super sure, but definitely leaning the route with all those arms.
Awesome. I mean, I love all of this draft prep that's going in and a lot of this thinking here. And I definitely agree, especially after trading someone like Lodolo, it would be nice to get another arm into that system. But I mean, like you said, there was a ton of great options there. And I admittedly haven't done a lot of draft research. Maybe, Cam, you've done a bit more, but I think you are right. I think there is a clear number 1. And then I think after number 1, it is kind of debatable who would go at 2. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer.
Yeah, exactly. I think there may be 2 or 3 guys in the conversation for those top few picks after Torkelson, obviously. But I haven't done a ton of extensive research since I pick at 29, and that's it. But
I
I'm glad to hear that you have.
Pick either. So
I just sorry to bounce.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to make another point about the draft is with Torkelson up top, Crochet, another guy. This draft is unique that there are a lot of quick producers, especially with the downsizing of the minor league system. Like there are going to be a lot of guys who see action this year, and especially those arms out of the bullpen. Now that teams have seen like what the White Sox have done with like the Chris Sale, Garrett Crochet mold, like bring this guy to the bullpen because he's just got the pure stuff for it. I would really not be surprised to see Meyer, Detmers, especially Detmers, making pretty significant contributions this year. So the draft there's a bit of a different focus.
I'd agree with that. It's going to be really interesting, especially these teams that are in like win now mode. I mean, I remember what was the Rays, I think, made the World Series for the first time in '08. I mean, I remember David Price coming up that September and just killing it, and he pitched for them maybe in the bullpen, I think, or maybe the rotation and that like playoff run. And I mean, he was a pretty big part of that. So I mean, I think you're right. I could absolutely see that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you bring up David Price, but look, even this year too, that's 12 years later, it's basically the same situation. You get this stud SEC pitcher with a dominant fastball and a great breaking ball to go with it, comes up late in the year and helps in the playoffs. And the argument could be made that the White Sox would have beaten Oakland in that game had Crochet went more than a third of an inning.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And then you also, on the other end of the other side of the coin, you get guys like Brandon Finnegan with the Royals out of TCU, who dominated in the 2014 postseason, gets flipped to the Reds and just completely has one great season, then blows his arm out and never does anything ever again. So it's kind of – Crochet is a very risky guy in that aspect.
Oh, 100%. And it's, you know, he's already risky because he's a fastball slider guy, super high spin. You know, fortunately his delivery is pretty repeatable, but Chris Sale was the magnum opus of those risks. He had the crazy motion. He came out of Florida Gulf Coast, so not an SEC school. He was 6'6", about 165. So the risk is certainly there with those guys. And a lot of teams, that's why I think a lot of teams won't directly follow the model, but you'll see, I would not be surprised to see Perry over in LA shoot Detmers through the system with that curveball.
No, there really is no such thing as a pitching prospect. So like, it's like in terms of like, they're just so unpredictable. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these pitchers that actually pans out, or who just ends up busting in the minors or comes up and just has a 7 ERA. And then like after a couple of years, we just kind of forget they exist. So it'll be fun. I think, like you said, this year's draft is a lot more intrigue. We have a lot less tape on these guys. I know that was one of the reasons Cam traded out of the first round. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to draft day. Hopefully it comes up soon. All right. One question that we always ask is if you could like trade for one player that maybe you haven't asked about yet, but like would like to inquire on, like, is there maybe a player that you have in mind? Obviously not something unrealistic like, Mike Trout or Yoan Moncada, because Connor's never going to trade him away. But like, is there like a realistic target that you've been thinking about?
Certainly. I honestly, there isn't like a one guy that we've looked at like boom, this is our guy. But we've really looked around, especially as I keep saying, in the arm area, looking for outfield help. We've been a little weak there, especially with some underwhelming seasons from Brian Reynolds, who is only a fastball hitter, and in 2020 didn't see any fastballs, and Mark Canha, who just had a really terrible year. So we've certainly been looking around for outfield help. We like Victor Robles a lot. Think he could be a really nice addition. Obviously, a steep price there, but don't think compared to some of the other younger outfielders that price would be as steep. And then I guess on the arm side, a guy we've looked at a lot is Aaron Savali. Great, one of those Indians prototypical guys that I guess is just going through that pipeline of pitching development and has shown that he's had phenomenal stuff. And I got to watch him pitch against the White Sox a couple times this year, and the guy's got some great arsenal. So definitely someone we'll look at.
He's fun to watch. Those are some great picks there. But yeah, anything else you want to kind of weigh in on, Cam?
Nope, I'm all set. Do you have any more propaganda to wrap up the show, Daniel?
Propaganda to end up the show. The Cubs are going to finish 4th place in the Central this year, and I'm really excited to watch it.
Ooh, that's a bold prediction. Yeah, I hope so too.
I mean, that's
going to be a 4th place team, even though they're trying to, seems like, tank. I hope for
right. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That I've had that propaganda like waiting in the wings for quite a bit of time, and then this recent news that the Reds are going to offload anything worth a nickel or more, I don't feel so great about that. So maybe the Cubs will finish 3rd in the Central.
Yeah, I can't believe they put Luis Castillo on the trade block today. I was not expecting that, but
Nationals are reaching out about Suarez, and it's
Sonny Gray to the Padres. I've heard that rumor.
not a fun.
Suarez would make a lot of sense in DC.
Oh, he would.
Yeah.
Sonny Gray is, I mean, from a Reds perspective, you know that the Padres are going to come in and overpay. So, I wouldn't.
Like they did for
Austin
Nola.
Exactly. You know they're in this, not win now, but it's almost like established credibility that they're not just this young up and coming team anymore, which obviously they were better this year, but still, there's always they have the hitting, but do they have the pitching? So I just feel like they would give a king's ransom for a guy like Gray.
I could see that.
Yeah. I'm very glad I got the opportunity to come on, and thank you for having me. I guess more appropriate.
No, of course. We're really glad we were able to get you on. Our goal is to get everyone to talk about their off season, and we're getting closer to reaching that goal. I think it's now just a couple teams, and we're like slowly scheduling them. So
awesome. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're glad you all are listening to it and enjoying this.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem.